Welcome to Crossroads. Investigators who were looking into President Donald Trump and former president previously, they've now been indicted. And also, meanwhile, there's some changes taking place at the IRS, and these could actually clear the way for investigations into the individuals and the groups funding the far left, including some of the billionaires you've been hearing so much about. And also, Trump is warning that he can, quote, use the Insurrection Act. He's just saying it directly now. I'll be deep diving into these topics a lot more today. Make sure to hit the like button, leave a comment. Let's get started. Now, first off, former Trump National Security Advisor John Bolton, he has now been indicted by a grand jury. Now, this follows the indictment of former FBI Director James Comey, also now facing charges, and comes amid calls for similar indictments of many other people to soon follow. Now, Justice Department says this. It says a federal grand jury returned an indictment today charging former National Security Advisor John Bolton, 76 years old, of Bethesda, Maryland, with serious crimes related to the mishandling of classified information. It says the indictment charges Bolton with 8 counts of transmission of national defense information and 10 counts of unlawful retention of NDI, again, national defense information. It says the indictment alleges that Bolton allegedly transmitted NDI by using personal email and messaging application accounts to send sensitive documents classified as high as top secret. It says these documents revealed intelligence about future attacks, foreign adversaries, and foreign policy relations. In other words, things you can't send over the internet and just email because it's a crime to do it. And guess what? They say it's not that big of a deal. They raided Mar-a-Lago, accusing Trump as a former president of doing similar things. Luckily for Trump, though, presidents have broad declassification abilities. A national security advisor does not. Now, it says this as well. The indictment also alleges that Bolton illegally retained NDI documents within his home. It says these documents included intelligence on an adversary's leader, as well as information revealing sources and collections used to obtain statements on a foreign adversary. In other words, things you probably don't want the public to see. It sounds pretty dang serious. And the only reason we know about it is because, well, he had it, right? Now, on that, John Bolton has pleaded not guilty, and he's saying this is basically just retribution. He's facing a maximum of 10 years in prison for each count of unlawful retention. And that's a lot of years in prison because he's facing, 8 and 10. That's a lot. He could go to prison for a very long time. Realistically, what does that mean? Probably not 80 years in prison. But if he's found guilty, he could face, at least maybe 10. Now, in addition to this, there were discussions that former special counsel Jack Smith could also face criminal investigation. In fact, there are calls for it right now. Hill said Senator Marsha Blackburn, Republican of Tennessee, and other GOP lawmakers requested the Department of Justice investigate former special counsel Jack Smith on Friday. Now, remember, Trump was investigated by 2 special counselors, first Robert Mueller, later on Jack Smith. Jack Smith's investigation into Trump was preemptively ended because Trump became president of the United States. But they say this, quote, Jack Smith was a rogue special counsel on a weaponized witch hunt against Republican senators, Blackburn wrote on social platform X. She said there must be consequences for this abuse of power. This is important because what has come out in recent investigations, it turns out the special counsel's office was actually spying on the communications of members of Congress. But it says she sent a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi alongside Republican Senators Lindsey Graham, Dan Sullivan, Tommy Tuberville, Representative Mike Kelly, that alleged Smith, the special counsel, had taken concerted steps to spy on duly elected members of Congress, which could be illegal. Actually, the law suggests that it was illegal, but we'll see. They say this, quote, in addition to these constitutional concerns, we believe that Jack Smith engaged in serious prosecutorial misconduct, meaning not only constitutional potential violations, but also misconduct, which means, well, they're referring him now to the Office Professional Responsibility, a DOJ division that investigates lawyers employed by the department who have been accused of a crime or professional misconduct. Basically, they want to have him disbarred. And we'll see if that ends there. Maybe it's disbarment, then recommendation for prosecution. They are getting Pam Bondi with the Justice Department involved with this, so, we'll have to see. But if we take what's happening on the broader picture as a sign of what could happen, James Comey, Clapper, now, of course, Jack Smith, we'll see, right? Now, it might not end there either. That's the big part with this. The FBI recently revealed that former special counsel, again, Jack Smith was in fact spying on Republican members of Congress. That's turning into a very big scandal right now. More details on this. Fox News said this. Former special counsel Jack Smith was allegedly tracking the private communications and phone calls of nearly a dozen Republican senators as part of his investigation into the January 6, 2021 Capitol riots, Fox News Digital has learned. In other words, January 6, right? Apparently, as part of his investigations, he was spying on Republican members of Congress. And they say a document reviewed by Fox News Digital revealed that Smith and his Arctic Frost team, that's what the code name they gave to it, investigating January 6, were allegedly tracking the phone calls of GOP Senators Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee, Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, Josh Hawley, Missouri, Cynthia Loomis of Wyoming, Bill Hagerty of Tennessee, Dan Sullivan of Alaska, Tommy Tuberville of Alabama, and GOP Representative Mike Kelly of Pennsylvania. A lot of them. Now, it says the document, recently discovered by FBI Director Kash Patel and exclusively obtained by Fox News Digital, is titled CAST Assistance and dated September 27, 2023. Now, why does this matter? Well, it was discovered by the FBI, and the FBI Director Kash Patel made this public, and somebody gave it to Fox News to make the public aware of it. What does that mean? It means they have evidence. This was taken as being legitimate by the director of the FBI. That evidence was provided, we'll find out how, to Fox News. And Fox News then reported it, and that's now causing members of Congress to call for further investigations, which the FBI will likely respond to, right? Now, it says that this CAST assistance, CAST, it refers to the FBI's Cellular Analysis Survey System. So, spying on your phone, right? Now, it notes the document, which has the names of FBI agents involved redacted, marks the case ID as Arctic Frost, election law matters, sensitive investigative matter, CAST, suggesting it's not just about January 6 or Trump. It's about all the allegations of, remember what started all that, right? Trump was alleging there was some funny business with the elections that then led for further investigations. On January 6, members of Congress were supposed to present all of the evidence that had been gathered that there was something going wrong with the elections. That was then disrupted by a bomb threat, the pipe bombs, which we still know very little about because they could find grandma waving an American flag but not a pipe bomber. And then, of course, that led to the insurrection, quote unquote, where Trump authorized the deployment of the National Guard to make sure it didn't happen. And other people overruled him and said they're going to make sure the National Guard is not there because it's bad optics. Now, meanwhile, there are some changes taking place at the IRS, and these could actually clear the way for investigations into other people, other individuals, and groups on the far left. We'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, two precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back. There are some big changes taking place right now at the IRS, and this is not just your regular overhaul. The changes taking place could actually clear the way for investigations into the individuals and groups funding the far left and political violence across the United States. Now, let me show you what's happening first. Newsbuster says this. It says, it appears that President Donald Trump was not bluffing at all. And when does he do that? When he stated that a potential criminal investigation should be launched against leftist connoisseurs of chaos, George Soros. It says this weekend, which Trump actually did, Trump actually issued a public statement suggesting there should be investigations into George Soros. Trump named him directly. He posted this on Truth Social. And we don't yet know whether the FBI is acting on those investigations. What we do know is this. Trump has signed several orders which work together in some ways. There was the designation of Antifa as a terrorist organization. There was the call for investigation not only into Antifa, but to the entire system of radicalization, mass protest, violence, threats against Americans, the No Kings riots type thing, BLM riots, any kind of action that has worked to suppress the speech and rights to gather of Americans, where if you or I try to go out and hold an event, we might have Antifa show up and threaten us and beat us, and that those threats work as a type of terrorism to prevent us from engaging in our, again, constitutional rights. Trump is suggesting there may be individuals funding non-governmental organizations, maybe some of them getting government money, involved in all of this. He has now called for an investigation into this. In fact, he even directed the Justice Department, not only them, but Homeland Security, as well as the Treasury, meaning financial investigations into the entire system, every single thing involved with it, every person, every employee, every foot soldier, every protester. This is happening right now. At least that was the order. And it's a big deal now that if in addition to that, the IRS is actually making some changes that could allow for criminal charges against people caught up in this investigation. This is a very big deal. Now look, Newsbuster says this weekend is another string of No Kings protests organized by the leftist group Indivisible, which could spur chaos activity. It says Soros, through the Active Society Action Front, issued a 2-year grant of $3 million in 2023 to Indivisible, the organization involved with this. And as the Wall Street Journal reported October 15th that the Trump administration is preparing sweeping changes at the Internal Revenue Service that would allow the agency to pursue criminal inquiries of left-leaning groups more easily. It notes that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, advisor Gary Chapley, who was a whistleblower on the Hunter Biden case, has put together a list of groups that the IRS Criminal Investigative Unit will be looking into that are, quote, creating anarchy in Democratic-led cities. And who are the groups behind this? Well, we'll see if Soros is tied in because he tends to be the big money behind, frankly, a lot of them, right? Now, notes that prominent among them being Soros and his affiliated philanthropies, the many organizations. Now, notice this development comes on the heels of the Justice Department directing prosecutors to start drafting plans to investigate the leftist billionaire. Soros being, in other words, under fire from multiple directions. It states, an Explosive Capital Research Center report, which served as the pretext for main justice interest in Soros, revealed that he funneled at least $80 million into organizations tied to domestic and foreign terrorism. And note that some of these Soros-funded terror-linked organizations include the radical climate-obsessed youth-led Sunrise Movement, which the CRC noted, quote, endorsed the Antifa-linked Stop Cop City campaign, in which activists currently facing over 40 domestic terrorism charges and 60 racketeering indictments, meaning this isn't like name-calling terrorist allegations. This is actual charges of terrorism. This is not like the name-calling kind. This is the literal kind. Now, notes the coalition engaged in a litany of riot activity like setting a police vehicle ablaze, throwing Molotov cocktails, bricks, and rocks at police, setting construction equipment on fire, blocking roads and obstacles with tires, harming police officers' eyes with lasers. There have been some allegations that has resulted in even pretty severe injuries. And it says also attacking the Atlanta Police Foundation's building with fireworks, which are explosive devices, but typically not treated as that serious. But it's very common these days with these mass protests and so on. Now, like on that point also, you might have seen over the weekend, the No Kings protests are back. And you have organizers saying, we're not organized. We're being told to not be violent. We're being trained to not be violent. In the same paragraph where they're saying we're not organized. So how are you not organized, but you're organizing with the 190 organizations, and you're getting trained, but you're not organized, and you're being told on how to de-escalate and avoid violence, but you're not organized? Good questions that may be investigated. But as you might have seen, they just held a huge wave of nationwide protests over the weekend. Most states, they were here in New York. And now, well, many are pointing to, well, who's behind them? Fox News said this. Guess who? Fox News, quote, billionaire donor George Soros is reportedly funding many of the organizations leading the No Kings protests, like Indivisible. A common name you're going to be hearing a lot more of probably. It says further in, behind the emotion and patriotic imagery of the protests, a Fox News digital investigation revealed that the movement polished pro-democracy branding masks in a coordinated network of Democratic tax-exempt nonprofits and labor unions, political action committees, coalitions, and for-profit protest consultants that include some of the most virulent activists against Israel, including self-declared socialist groups like the Party for Socialism and Liberation, Democratic Socialists of America, which actually used to run Rose City Antifa, and also Students for a Democratic Society. In other words, it's not grassroots. It's unions, political action committees, professional protest organizations, and a massive number of NGOs, many of which are tax exempt and some of which get your tax dollars. Now it says, according to a public database of the protests organizers compiled by the Pearl Project, a journalism initiative, the protests partners include 265 mostly nonprofit organizations, including some anti-Israel groups like Jewish Voice for Peace, exploiting the nonprofit benefits to wage a political war against the sitting president, which could be problematic, of course, because, nonprofits, it depends on the designation. 501c3s, you can't really endorse a candidate. Political activism is a bit dicey, especially if you're helping one party over the other. Could this be something to pull their nonprofit status? It doesn't normally happen, but we'll have to see. But it notes their nonprofit status shields them from paying taxes on most of their total annual revenues of $2.9 billion, even while they engage in partisan work they are not supposed to be doing. Awkward, right? Will they still be allowed to do that because they've been in the past? I don't know. But it says critics say they are allegedly skirting, if not violating, tax and nonprofit laws. How do you skirt or violate nonprofit laws while engaging in, let's say, activism against the sitting president of the United States and working with political action committees, which are obviously politically motivated on one side, and working with actual political parties like Democratic Socialists of America, while still saying that you're not being partisan? How does that work? But it says this, event organizers did not return requests for comment. And a quote here says that they call it no kings, but what they've built is an empire of tax-exempt organizations doing the Democratic Party's work on the taxpayers' dime, said Jessica Pounds, a computer scientist who runs a platform, datarepublican.com, following the money on these organizations, and said, quote, they are using every excuse in the book, from immigration to Israel to rage bait America. Agitprop, in other words, agitation propaganda. Getting people riled up for political reasons, if you want to break it down. And it says there is nothing charitable about their professional protest enterprise, and they should be investigated for fomenting so much hate in America behind the shield of charity work. Now, will that happen? We'll see. What we can say is this. President Donald Trump, again, has ordered investigations. Those investigations are targeting all the funding, organizing, NGOs, nonprofits, maybe political action committees, even possibly media organizations that have been involved in any and every way with any kind of mass protest like this, especially those that have resulted in the suppression of free speech or gathering of Americans. Now, you might say, well, isn't Trump going against the free speech and gathering of Americans? They're probably going to argue that. But the counter-argument to it is that if Republicans were to do anything even close to this, you would have people showing up with baseball bats and pepper spray and everything else, harassing them, attacking them, beating them, and making them too afraid to ever do it. One of the main reasons they don't hold protests like this is because they're afraid of being targeted with violence. They're afraid of being doxxed. They're afraid of being named. They're afraid of getting fired. They're afraid of having their families threatened, because every single time they do anything close to this, they get attacked, they get threatened, they get doxxed. And that system is allowing it so that one side can protest, one side can gather, and the other side cannot. And the irony is that many organizations tied in with this are tied in with the violence as well. Organizations tied in any way with groups like Antifa, tied in any way with the media, doxing people, naming people, attacking people, labeling people, working as dog whistles for their insurrectionists, quote unquote, to go and target everybody and suppress the rights of Americans, which Trump is suggesting could actually be grounds to do something very big, which is maybe even invoke the Insurrection Act. And guess what? President Donald Trump has issued a brand new warning. Trump is saying publicly that he has the power to use the Insurrection Act. He's saying he might even do it. This is Trump on Fox News Sunday's Morning Futures with Maria Bartiromo. Watch.
And don't forget, and I haven't used it, but don't forget, I can use the Insurrection Act. 50% of the presidents almost have used that. And that's unquestioned power. I choose not to. I'd rather do this. But I'm met constantly by fake politicians that think that, it's not like a part of the radical left movement to have safety. These cities have to be safe. Our cities that are Democrat run, exclusively just about, are unsafe cities.
Now, that would be a very big deal if Trump did it. It would be very controversial. I'll explain in a bit, but let me say what it does first. Basically, what this does, this would give Donald Trump very broad powers to use the military like he's been trying to. Now, this would not be martial law. A lot of people say, oh, that'd be martial law. It would technically not be, because martial law would include the use of military tribunals. The military takes over the courts. It would not go that far. Now, could Trump do that? He could. That would also be very controversial, but he could do it. But at the base level, the declaration of an insurrection, if Trump were to do it, he could use federal forces to assist ICE in deportations like he's been doing in California, like Los Angeles, like he's been doing to an extent in Washington, D.C., like he's trying to do elsewhere. It would let him go much further with that. It could include the use of military for some forms of law enforcement, not controlling the courts, that would be martial law, but maybe, like what we watched in Washington, D.C., putting down acts of crime, going after people accused of being involved in an insurrection, that kind of stuff. It could include other operations, quite a bit actually, but what Trump is saying here is that he can do it. And it looks like at the very least he's talking about it and considering it. As I've mentioned before, Trump has said this previously. Vice President J.D. Vance has also said it. If Trump is saying it and J.D. Vance is saying it, I would assume that means they're talking about it. If they're talking about it, I assume they're exploring it. And if they're exploring it, it suggests they might just do it. Now, like on this point also, I mentioned that it would be controversial. Let me explain how that works. If Trump were to declare an insurrection, if he were to invoke the Insurrection Act, and this has been done many times in the past, this is George Washington putting down the Whiskey Rebellion. It was Abraham Lincoln going after like the KKK after the Civil War. It was, Bush invoking it to put down the LA riots. It was a civil rights movement when National Guard had to escort black students into schools because their civil rights were being threatened. The basic argument is this, and then there is a good argument for it, okay? That if there is a conspiracy to deny American citizens their constitutional rights, i.e. free speech, the freedom of belief, your civil rights, the rights to, your racial issues and so on, your civil rights, it could also be your right to gather. If these are being suppressed by a conspiracy, Trump could do it. Now, what is Trump saying in many of his orders right now? Trump is saying investigate whether there is a conspiracy to suppress the rights of Americans. In fact, Trump has called for this directly. And what he's suggesting is that there is, in fact, a conspiracy between the media, labeling people, doxing people, between non-governmental organizations, funding NGOs, which are then doxing people, naming people, listing people, attacking people, which are then also a system funding the foot soldiers, people like Antifa or mass protest, which are then acting on this, carrying out threats, violence, attacks, suppression, and by extension of that, what are they doing? They're terrorizing Americans. Now, in fact, Antifa now designated as a terrorist organization, terrorizing Americans, making them too afraid of engaging in political speech. And if Americans are too afraid to engage in political speech, that is then a threat against the system of government we have, and also an act of suppressing their constitutional rights, meaning a conspiracy against rights, meaning Trump could invoke the Insurrection Act, meaning Trump could put that down. The challenge he's going to face, though, is that courts could challenge it. So if Trump invokes it, arrests everybody, everyone's in prison, right? It comes to an end. All those little court judges, every single one of them can challenge all of it. And the entire country would be like, it would go from chaos on the streets to chaos in the courts. And that would lead right into the midterm elections and maybe into the presidential elections. You would then have calls to impeach Trump and the whole 9 yards. And, history repeats itself. Trump doesn't want that, I would assume. And so what he's doing is he's doing the investigations first. We'll see if it gets to the point of the invocation of the Insurrection Act, but he's doing the investigations first. The other problem he has is that if he invokes it without strong evidence that it's needed, for example, the BLM riots probably would have been enough to invoke it because remember they were invoked for the LA riots. If there are acts of mass political violence suppressing people from carrying out speech, like Charlie Kirk, for example, being killed, that could be enough for it. But the problem is, if you have these No Kings protesters saying that they're not organized, but they're being trained, and part of the training is on how to de-escalate, it looks like they're trying to avoid stepping over that line. So the coordinated system is pushing it to the threshold but not crossing that line. If that did happen, Trump said that we're going to invoke it. Let's say he invoked it in California or Los Angeles, like one state maybe. If he were to do that, at the federal level, all the federal judges could also challenge it. And they could put injunctions on it. They could do that the whole 9 yards. And they've been doing it. So if Trump is going to do it, he needs to do it right, or it's going to backfire on him, basically, which is why I assume they're not doing it as of now. But he's saying he can, right? But on the point also, the first terror charges against Antifa are now taking place. There are people accused of being involved in the July 4th attack on the ICE facility in Alvarado, Texas, and they're being charged with providing material support for terrorists, which you might see a lot more of that. Anybody who's been funding Antifa, organizing Antifa, maybe carrying water for Antifa, have they been providing material support for terrorists? Well, These individuals are facing charges for that, in addition to attempted murder of officers and employees of the United States for discharging a firearm in relation to a crime of violence. And on this as well, when it comes to the other potential actions against Antifa, we're going to have to wait and see whether others face criminal charges on terrorism, because it's just now starting. We'll have to see, right? And meanwhile, another big thing happening right now, right? The U.S. military is destroying drug traffickers with targeted strikes and then publishing videos of them doing it and saying, look what we did. Watch us blow up this boat. Smuggling boats are being blown out of the water. These are, again, accused of being drug traffickers. We assume they're right. We don't really know. But the United States has also now named Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro as the leader of the Cartel of the Suns. Actually, that was a Biden-era policy, but Trump has continued that. And under Trump, it's now being moved into actual military actions. They're carrying out very broad actions now in Venezuela, starting to at least. But what's really interesting is this could spread. President Donald Trump has named the leader of another South American country as the leader of a drug operation, and that country is Colombia. Donald Trump said this on Truth Social. He said, President Gustavo Petro of Colombia is an illegal drug leader, strongly encouraging the massive production of drugs in big and small fields all over Colombia. Colombia is known for cocaine, right, and other things like that. And Trump noted, quote, it has become the biggest business in Colombia by far, and Petro does nothing to stop it, despite large-scale payments and subsidies from the USA that are nothing more than a long-term rip-off of America. In other words, Americans were funding this country. This country is funding, or at least allowing, mass drug production, which is then going to cartels, gangs, and the entire system to dismantle and disrupt like basic civil order throughout all of Latin America, and killing Americans by extension as these drugs make their way here. So Trump said, quote, as of today, these payments, the money we for some reason give to Colombia, or any other form of payment or subsidies, will no longer be made to Colombia. In other words, another country it turns out we're giving money to for some reason unknown to us is now no longer getting that money. And Trump said the purpose of the drug production is the sale of massive amounts of product into the United States, causing death, destruction, and havoc. And he said, Petro, a low-rated and very unpopular leader, this is Trump saying it, he said, with a fresh mouth toward America, better close up these killing fields immediately or the United States will close them up for him. And it won't be done nicely, Trump said, suggesting that you might get the old Venezuelan treatment where we bomb them and then post videos of it online and laugh about it, which Trump has literally been doing. And Trump said, thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Now, that's a big deal for a lot of reasons. On one part, this is a big deal because drug cartels are now designated as terrorist organizations, which means you can investigate them, spy on them, and bomb them, right? If you're a suspected terrorist, you lose a lot of your rights. And it's a big deal also because he's naming the leader of an entire country as the leader of drug operations, which, you know, we saw him do against Maduro, and look how that's going, right? They're launching strikes against them. It also opens up a lot of doors for military operations, maybe targeting those fields large and small, as Trump said. Now, like already the United States, as I mentioned, is expanding its operations against Venezuela. That includes, we're hearing rumors of some strikes even within the country. And so adding Colombia to this would possibly expand these operations into yet another country. And it doesn't end there. I would actually say there's something a lot bigger with this. Another big part is a lot of countries are engaged with the drug cartels. A lot of them. You have entire countries that are basically narco states. North Korea, a lot of its economy is arms trafficking, drug trafficking, and counterfeit money. A lot of countries in Latin America are drug countries. They make their money off the black market. Colombia, one of its biggest markets is drug trade. Mexico, one of its core GDP products is drug trade. Venezuela, it turns out, drug trade. And the problem is, the way the cartel works, and there's a lot of cartels, but the way they work, they're very tied in with government in many of these countries. In some cases, You know, they even run the local governments. In some areas, even of Mexico, the local government is the cartel. They actually are the cartel. And if you're a politician, if you're campaigning on stopping it, they just kill you. So it's very hard to get political power. It's very hard to be a judge or a police chief or anything in these countries without having ties to the cartels. And unfortunately, because of that, a lot of them have ties to the cartels, like a ridiculous number of them. And that's a problem throughout most of Latin America, through most of the entire region. That's a huge problem. It's also a problem in parts of Asia. It's a big problem in parts of the Middle East, like Taliban. A lot of the economy was poppy fields for opium. It's a problem in many countries, actually. And so if Trump is now suggesting, hey, we're going to name the heads of entire countries as being drug leaders because of your core GDP products are drugs, we're going to go after you. That's a very big deal. Currently, he's only really doing that against Venezuela and Colombia. It could be a lot of others. I'll say one thing I haven't seen other media say yet. Remember what Trump said when he was on the campaign trail. When Trump was on the campaign trail and he said he was going to do this, what else did he say? He said something very interesting. Donald Trump, this is big, right? Donald Trump said when he was on the campaign trail in relation to using the entire military and entire intelligence system to go after the drug cartels, that if any government in any country tries to block it, that Trump will expose their connections to the drug trade. And so that makes me wonder, we all know that many governments are tied in with this. Why is Trump not naming all the other ones? It's probably because he has not yet either focused on it yet, or they're not trying to block it. They're cooperating to some extent. In Mexico, for example, the government is actually working pretty well with the United States in going after the cartels. And what does it say about Colombia? We don't know. Trump is basically giving him Trump's basically given the head of Colombia a choice. He can either take down those drug fields himself, or Trump's going to do it for him. But that's what Trump is saying. We'll see if he acts on it. But I will note that Trump tends to do what he says he's going to do. Something you can't fault him on. He typically does exactly what he says he's going to do. Now look, another big thing I will add to this. Do you know the kingpin of the drug trade is? Do you know which country is basically running most of the cartels? Do you know which country does the money laundering, provides the precursors, the synthetics, does all this stuff? Can you guess? Well, it's the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese Communist Party is the kingpin. The cartels, in many ways, work for the Chinese Communist Party. Many of them in Latin America are trained in China. A lot of them are Maoist trained. Many of them are narco-terrorist organizations, meaning they're drug cartels, they're narcos, but they're terrorists. And terrorists, a lot of them being like Shining Path, they were terrorists in the communist sense. They were trying to overthrow the governments. These are Maoist, China-trained drug cartels. And many of these programs were even started by the CCP itself under Mao Zedong. He called it people's opium. Mao Zedong went to Cuba and established through Cuba intelligence operations to spur into motion all the cartels. So Cuba is kind of the proxy for this, at least going back to the Cold War. Cuban intelligence services going into these different countries, starting up these trades, the CCP puppeteering it, doing again the supply routes, doing again the money laundering through major Chinese banks. Bank of China is involved with it. And then, of course, seeding it in other countries. In Canada, a lot of it's run through the casinos on the Native American reservations. In the United States, same thing. A lot of it goes through casinos. So, big deal. Will the entire thing get taken down? Is Trump going piece by piece? We don't know yet. We'll see, but they're doing some stuff on it, and we're watching the videos on X as they blow up the drug ships. We could see a lot more of those. And if Trump is actually going after the countries involved in the drug trade, well, a whole lot more could soon be added to that list. We will see. All right, everyone, that said, questions, comments, anything you want to talk about, leave it in the chat. Let's jump into some questions. And let's see here. I apologize also for the fuzzy video today. internet problems, what are you going to do? I'd apologize for that. Ashley from California, you're saying, I'm just curious if the people doing the No Kings protests understood that if we had a king, they wouldn't be able to do their protests. You know, Trump has said that a lot. Trump's like, well, you know, it's a good thing we don't have a king so that you can do this stuff. And Trump's like, I wish I was a king, then I could like carry out actions without being blocked by a district judge every time I do something, right? Trump is kind of memeing on this, saying, you know, geez, I wish I was king, but luckily I'm not, which is why you keep doing all this stuff to block everything I do. That's what he's saying, basically. Seymour Butts, you're saying, Josh, have you ever wondered why nonprofits mostly lean left? Why? You know, Seymour, that's a very good question. Why do most nonprofits lean left? Okay, if you want to hear my take on it, there's a few reasons. One is almost all the conservative nonprofits get attacked. Like investigated, like IRS investigations, like media hit pieces constantly, doxing, threats against them. A lot of nonprofits on the right face constant attack. Some of them have people getting murdered, like Charlie Kirk getting murdered, right? Turning Point USA. What does it look like if you're a conservative nonprofit? This is what it looks like. The media does constant hit pieces on you. They just constantly go after you. They constantly investigate all of your finances. And when Democrats get into power, they oftentimes use the IRS to go after it. Turning Point USA was actually investigated pretty early on. A lot of media were doing investigations into them. I'm talking like 2017, 2018. They claimed that Turning Point was a dark money operation for the Republican Party. And they claimed that, you know, they were helping Trump get elected. And is this illegal? They were looking into that because how dare a Republican-leaning organization be involved in any way, because the left does it all the time, but the right's not allowed to do it. It looks like, for example, what happened. Does anybody remember what happened to the Tea Party? Does anybody remember what happened to the Tea Party? In America, prior to Trump, we had a new constitutional political party emerging. People were saying, you know what, Republican, Democrat, there are things I like, things I dislike about both sides, but I believe that they're not really following the Constitution as much as I would like. And so people launched the Tea Party, which was a constitutional revivalist party. Now, what I would actually say that I think Trump is, the changes he made to the Republican Party and to the MAGA movement are kind of close to the Tea Party, but we don't have the Tea Party anymore. Does anybody remember why? The reason was the Obama IRS investigated them and destroyed them. That's why. It's very hard for Republicans and conservatives to do anything because typically they do deal with this. The Epoch Times, we're a nonprofit. We're facing ongoing legal attacks, constant hit pieces. It's just ongoing. Most other groups, you know, you can look at you know, any kind of the legal groups on the right side of politics. The leaders get hit pieces. Their family members get doxxed. You know, their pasts get digging up. Everything. How often do you see that happening on the left? Until recently, it is happening now to an extent, but until recently, basically never. You know, you didn't really see Republicans doxing, you know, whoever runs, you know, X, like a leftist nonprofit. You don't really see that happening. If they do, they tend to get attacked for doing it. They get sued for it. There's lawfare, right? You don't really see them engaging in the types of like really far left stuff. Like you don't see Republicans putting on masks and, you know, going outside people's houses and threatening their families. Like if it's happened, it's been so rare, it's like almost never happens. It happens very often on the other side. Very often that happens on the other side. You know, in other words, you don't really see an equal use of power. Republicans tend to not use it. That is changing now, though. Trump's investigations into it. Many people on the left are saying, "Hey, Trump is, you know, weaponizing justice," and you know, are they right? That's up to your opinion. You might say they're right or wrong. But what you can do is you can say Trump is basically doing to them what they've been doing to Republicans for decades, and you are seeing that happen now. And now, is that in regards to the Trump just weaponizing the system, or is it Trump saying, look, you guys have been basically violating the law, shutting down free speech, shutting down the freedom to gather, and basically carrying out political terrorism with the intent of making Republicans too afraid to speak or gather? I think that's actually what's happened. I can tell you as a journalist who does get branded more on the right-hand side. And I will note, all sides did an investigation, blind survey. They found Epoch Times is the least biased newspaper in America. We are the least biased newspaper in America, according to a blind survey done by all sides. We're less biased than New York Times. We're less biased than Wall Street Journal. We're less biased than Reuters and AP and like even the British ones, according to a blind survey. But for some reason, the media labels us as like far right. Why is that? Right? Maybe it's because we've been labeled. And so I can tell you personally, I deal constantly with harassment from the far left and media organizations and that kind of stuff. I deal constantly with this. And that's what it looks like when you, again, say things they don't like or just speak the truth. They don't like it. And so I actually do agree that a lot of people would not be willing to face the kinds of attacks that people like myself do. And if you're not willing to face those attacks, what do? You keep your mouth shut and you stay in your house and you play the game and you don't make noise. And I would say that the suppression of people because they're afraid of getting attacked, like me and like a lot of other people, what does that do? It works as a form of terrorism to scare them into submission. And so I would actually agree that the organizations involved in the hit pieces, the doxing, the attacks, are acting as terrorists based on that alone. Because what is terrorism? It is the threat or use of violence to obtain a political goal. And if they're threatening violence, if they're threatening people to make them too afraid to speak out, that is terrorism. And so, on one side, that's it. To your point, Seymour, one other thing I'd say is the funding. Okay, let's put it this way. What does it look like if you're on the left-hand side of politics and you're a nonprofit versus the right-hand side? If you're on the left-hand side, you get corporate donations. All the big corporations donate to you. PBS runs commercials. Our sponsors donate to them. You get donations from federal government grants like USAID. You get a lot of money. You get big billionaire donations tied in with like financial institutions and tied in with big corporations. You get money just flooding on you. You can start up a random NGO, like give a little kickback to someone in charge of the money, which they found happening, by the way, and suddenly you're like getting government money to like study fish gender in like Uganda or something like, maybe not Uganda, but some random country. Uganda's pretty conservative, actually. You know what I mean? You get money for like crazy stuff. Like that's the way it works. If you're a conservative, what does it look like? You get called a dark money operation, like Turning Point was called, like the Epoch Times was labeled as. So the media labeled Epoch Times as a dark money operation for Trump because during the 2020 elections, the 2020 elections, we were running advertisements on Facebook where we were talking about our news stories and our investigations. And they alleged that because the news stories we were reporting, basically did not carry water for like Russiagate or Spygate, we were saying that, these stories are fake, that we were carrying water for Trump, and because of that, we were a dark money operation for him as a nonprofit. That was the way they framed that entire narrative. It turns out we were right about everything. It is true that Russiagate was fake. We reported that. We were attacked for it. We were called QAnon conspiracy for saying it. We reported on Spygate. Turns out we were right about everything. All the media attacking us were wrong. We were called a dark money operation for doing that, and we had a lot of our finances canceled because of it. We lost a lot of our ability to do advertising because of it, even though it was all based on lies. That's what it looks like. They did the same thing to Turning Point USA when they were calling it a dark money operation. It looks like that. It looks like that if you get big advertisers, when a news outlet like New York Times does a hit piece on you, sometimes they call your advertisers and they say, why are you giving money to this organization? These are what we're labeling them as. Do you affiliate yourself with these values? And a lot of people don't want to deal with a tax, and they back out, and you lose all your money. And so you have a lot of people on the right who are demonetized. A lot of people on the right, they can only get money from a handful of businesses. A lot of people on the right who you don't get government grants, I'll tell you that. Most of them, I think Turning Point gets some good donations, but for the most part, you really don't get many good donations. And that's how it looks. You're really, what do you get? You get the pillow ads, you get the VPN ads, and you get like the gold ads, right? I'm not complaining. I'm glad we have them, but those are pretty much the only businesses that oftentimes will like advertise when you're on that side, and that's how it looks. And so to make a long story short, the reason why you have a lot of leftist NGOs and nonprofits and not a lot on the right is because the system will destroy you, or try to if you're on the right. And that is how it has been in this country. And a lot of people have been victims from it. TZ Burton, you say, I saw this old guy with a sign, fund libraries, not war. One, we do, and two, I agree. No King's protest. Did anybody notice something strange about the No King's protest? Or not strange, unique. Anybody notice something about them? Okay, what is the demographic of the No King's protests? Come on. What was the relative demographic if you went there and you saw it? Didn't any of you see videos where like journalists were going there and people were like blocking their cameras and harassing them? What was the demographics of those people? It's like old white people. It's like 60, 70 plus. They didn't get the young people for some reason. In fact, during the previous No King's protests, there were some like younger protesters that were like, young people, where are you? Why are you not here? And they were taking it as kind of a bad sign for the elections, even like, oh, geez. We're not getting the grassroots out. We're not getting the young people involved. What happened? It's kind of funny. It looks like it's a lot of old hippies. If anybody wants to write a very funny movie or a best-selling book, you could do it on this. The No King's Last Hurrah, where a bunch of aging hippies get together and they want to get the band back together, and they want to do one more protest, man. Just one more protest. You would have the funniest movie ever. That'd be such a great movie. But that's kind of what you're seeing. You're seeing a lot of like old hippies just wanting to give it one more go, man. And that's what you're watching. But yeah, like I'm all for funding libraries. I wish libraries actually kept a lot of older books. I know a lot of them have started getting rid of older books. If I were to make some changes to libraries, I'd stock a lot more of the classics. But I understand too, you want to get kids engaged, and they don't always want that. Easy Breezy, you're saying, no more funding any other country but the USA. I am sick of my tax dollars going somewhere where we need help in our own country. When we need help in our own country. Okay, so I can tell you a bit more on this, because I've wondered, I'm sure a lot of you have the same thought. Why do we send money to like every corner of the earth? Trump, when he was going over like even like bad trade deals, he was like, geez, he's like saying, geez, I hope this place doesn't start a country, because we'll probably start sending money to them. I hope we don't discover life on other planets, because we'll probably start sending money to them, right? Like, God forbid we discover aliens, because we have to start paying them too. But we're also making bad trade deals with we trade at a loss with all but I think Trump said 2 countries on the entire planet. Crazy, right? Now, like on this point, I've wondered why this happens. Like, why do we give all these countries money? I can tell you 2 sides of this. On one side, they don't tell you. They don't tell you. I can tell you historically why it was done, though, and this may be interesting, because I haven't really seen anybody mention this before. As far as I know, this is not ever discussed. Historically, And I'm not saying this is why America does it, and I don't know why they don't say this publicly. I don't know if there's a reason for it. Historically, the reason a country would give money to other countries was to make them use their currency. That is the reason. So if a country was printing tinder, right, legal tinder, whether it's, fiat currency, like paper bills is kind of a new thing, but like in Rome, for example, the printing of coins was almost like a political thing. You print the face of who you want to be the next leader or so on. You print tinder that can be used in the economy of this country, right? The tinder is tied in with the economy. So if you want people to trade with you, you want them using your money. The use of tinder is also a type of diplomacy. These days it's involved with sanctions. If countries are not trading with U.S. dollars, sanctions basically have no power. So America has diplomatic power through that. We're able to enforce a certain idea of a system. We're also able to enforce a certain type of economic order. Historically, that is why you gave countries money. It's the same reason why you go to a casino and they give you a handful of tokens, say, hey, first hundred bucks is on us. Have at it. They want you to play in the casino. They want you to engage in the economy, right? I mean, maybe that's not the best example, but they want you to engage in the economy. And so if you have money, what do you do with it? Well, you got to spend it on stuff that you can spend American dollars on. If we give money to the Taliban, which for some reason we have, what does that mean? It means the Taliban has to go and find a way to spend it. What does that mean? They have to spend it on stuff relative to the American economy or other countries that trade in USD. And that's the way it works. You want them using your currency. Now, on that point, I would assume that's why they're not totally cutting it off. I assume that's why Trump isn't saying we're going to stop giving money to anybody. Done. It's over. I assume that's why he's not doing it. This is purely my analysis. I have not seen any public statements saying this is why they do it. This is purely my analysis. But I think the reason we give other countries money is because we're trying to maintain, the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency, and that's one of the ways. That's one of the ways historically you would do it. All right, everyone. That said, questions, comments, anything you want to talk about, leave it in the chat for tomorrow. And again, we'll be discussing a lot more tomorrow because a lot is going on these days. If anything is happening, well, there's no shortage of news. In fact, I meant to talk to you about China today. We'll have to go into that tomorrow. Xi Jinping is now just a figurehead. Xi Jinping has lost control of the Chinese military. This is massive. Join me tomorrow. We'll talk about this a lot more. And that said, as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.